Let's talk about omission. To be completely honest, I'm always a bit cautious when talking about this topic. There aren't many definitive research out there yet, and as I mentioned in the previous episode, a Korean sentence inherently relies on context to be understood accurately. But I'm taking a little bravery today because we have to talk about this at least once to move forward to the next level. If you remember just the main point from today's episode, let it be this. In Korean, omission itself is an active part of the sentence or conversation. Please keep this one rule in mind. When we break down omission, we're looking at two main subtopics. Number 1, the omission of case markers. Number 2, the omission of sentence components like dropping the subject or object. Let's look at case marker omission first. Just so you know, please take what I say here as a helpful reference. This is still an incomplete area of linguistic research, and I don't claim to know it perfectly myself. However, as a Korean teacher, I believe it's my responsibility to help you grasp the big picture. Earlier, I said that omission itself is a part of a conversation. How can not saying something be part of a conversation? Have you thought about it? Let me ask you a question about English. When you say I go to school or I go to bed, you know exactly which school or bed you're referring to. So why do you say school instead of the school, or bed instead of the bed? If grammatical consistency requires a definite thing that both speakers know, it should be the school. But from what I've learned, phrases like go to school or go to bed operates as chunk expressions where the focus is entirely on the activity, studying or sleeping, rather than the physical object. Now, this isn't the exact same scenario as Korean, but if you look closely, English is also full of grammatical inconsistencies, and I want you to remember that omitting the definite marker the is about the whole phrase. You know those basic case markers you learned from day 1? The subject markers 이 and 가, and the object markers 을 and 를. Believe it or not, there are times when you must omit them to keep the conversation flowing naturally. While I'm not a master of omission, one thing is for sure. When a Korean noun appears without a marker, there's a baseline assumption, almost like telepathy or a shared unspoken rule that both speakers already know what it is. Looking at the bigger picture, dropping a marker has less to do with the individual definiteness of a noun and more to do with the context of the entire sentence or situation. Let's imagine a casual conversation between two close friends. One person says, 나 오늘 진짜 피곤해. Notice how 나 doesn't have the subject markers 이, 가, or the topic markers 은, 는 attached. Why? Because there's no reason to put them there. If you attach 은, 는 to the subject right at the start of a casual conversation, the sentence turns into a statement about your typical character or permanent nature, which completely clashes with the word 오늘. Typicality or permanence and a specific singular day like today cannot coexist logically. However, depending on the situation, 이, 가 could be used. While 나 오늘 진짜 피곤해 is the most natural for daily chat, the moment you say 내가 오늘 진짜 피곤해 using the subject marker 가, you instantly shift the spotlight to who is tired. It emphasizes that out of everyone, I'm the one who is tired today. Or it signals to the listener that you have a hidden intention or favor coming off right after the statement. So if someone uses the full marker and says 내가 오늘 진짜 피곤해, it usually means one of two things. Number 1, that person is hiding a follow-up thought. For example, I'm really tired today, so please don't do anything to make me more tired. Number 2, that person wants to emphasize that it is that person rather than anyone else who is exhausted today. To truly know which one it is, you'd have to actually be in that specific conversation. This might sound abstract for you, so let's break it down using an imaginary conversation. From this point, we have to look at case markers and sentence component omissions together. Because real-world conversations are seamless and continuous, not chopped up. Let's go back to our example conversations. A says, 나 오늘 진짜 피곤해. And B says, 왜? B could technically say 왜 피곤해? Repeating the verb. But between close friends, not repeating what was just said is exactly how conversational cohesion is maintained in Korean. I wanted to use an easier word than cohesion, but it's truly the accurate term. Let's look at the full conversation. A says, 나 오늘 진짜 피곤해. B says, 왜 피곤해? A says, 오늘 내가 토픽 시험을 쳤거든. Look at A's second response. Why did they suddenly bring back all the markers, even though the listener obviously knows who I am and what topic is? There's a reason. I'll do a dedicated episode on case markers later, but the core rule for today is this. We use all the case markers when we believe the entire sentence holds high informational value for the listener. You can see this clearly in news articles where almost every sentence retains its case markers. Now, you might ask, can I just say 오늘 나 토픽 시험 쳤거든 without the markers? That is an excellent question because the answer is yes, absolutely. It is a perfectly complete natural sentence. Because the sentence is short enough, dropping the markers simply means you're sharing a piece of information as a regular part of the chat without trying to emphasize any specific detail. What about mix and matching? 오늘 내가 토픽 시험 쳤거든. 오늘 나 토픽 시험을 쳤거든. Both are 100% correct. If you attach the subject marker like 내가, you emphasize the person who did the action. If you attach the object marker like 시험을, you emphasize the target of the action. Then, what does emphasis mean here? Think of it logically. Emphasis is relative. To understand what is small, there must be something large next to it. If you want something to look incredibly small, you put it next to something massive. Ultimately, extreme emphasis functions as a form of exclusion. In linguistics, this is called exclusivity. By emphasizing 나, you're excluding people who are not me. By emphasizing 토픽 시험, you're excluding other exams. Depending on what the speakers already know, other exams could mean any test in the world, or specifically other language tests. This is why I always say Korean grammar must be understood as a spectrum, not as black and white rules. I think learning Korean requires letting go of the obsession to completely master it through rigid formulas. To choose the right words, you should think about the people you are talking to. You know, everyone has different lives and experiences. While understanding the general pattern is definitely helpful, to use a metaphor, trying to grab rigid grammar rules is like trying to catch water with your hands. Instead of struggling to hold on to it, it's much better to experience the texture of the water in various ways to truly understand what it is. Go ahead and look up how the dictionary describes the noun water. I bet it defines in a way that sounds almost impossible to understand, just like how I explained Korean Omission today. Actually, since we're talking about it, let's just look it up right now. If I search water on Merriam-Webster, which I use a lot, Merriam-Webster. Here it is. Let me read it to you. Imagine you're hearing this explanation assuming you don't know what water is. The liquid that descends from the clouds as rain forms streams, lakes, and seas, and is a major constituent of all living matter, and that when pure is an odorless, tasteless, very slightly compressible liquid oxide of hydrogen H2O, which appears bluish in thick layers, freezes at 0 degrees Celsius and boils at 100 degrees Celsius, has a maximum density at 4 degrees Celsius and a high specific heat, is feebly ionized to hydrogen and hydroxyl ions, and is a poor conductor of electricity and a good solvent. What do you think? If you didn't know what water was, would you read this and say, now I get it perfectly? If you already knew words like rain, lakes, and seas, you might catch the drift. But without even that basic knowledge, wouldn't it be a total mess? All you really needed to do was just see it and touch it once. As a side note, from my experience, people who are great at a language aren't necessarily the ones who know its grammar inside out. Instead, they're usually individuals who have great people skills when talking in their native tongue, or those who have an excellent command of their own mother tongue. I was actually the exact case where I studied English endlessly without realizing that my command of my own native language was lacking. At some point, my English stopped improving, which really frustrated me. But then I realized something. If I couldn't explain something in English, it was usually because I couldn't explain it properly in my native language either. Since then, I've made an effort to speak well in Korean and use words and expressions that fit the situation. Naturally, without buying more English books or taking incredibly expensive classes, I felt my English skills steadily going up. Well, that's just my personal feelings, of course. The point I wanted to make is that you need a solid foundation in what you already know to truly learn something new. To summarize marker omission before we move on, in daily life, as long as the sentence is short enough, Koreans tend to drop markers completely unless they want to emphasize something specific. Now let's move on to omitting sentence components like subjects, objects, or verbs. This happens when the speaker makes a quick mental judgment that the listener will understand the meaning even if the words are left unsaid. Let's look at two common sentence patterns where this happens: SOV, subject, object, verb patterns, and double subject patterns. First, the SOV pattern. Here's a casual conversation between close friends. A says, 너 뭐 먹을래? B says, 이거. A says, 또. If they want it to be slightly more clear, it would be like this. A says, 너 뭐 먹을래? B says, 이거 먹을래. A responds, 또 뭐 먹을래? As you can hear, the part being omitted here is the repeating verb. Unless a brand new verb enters the conversation, you can drop the repetitive action in subsequent sentences without disrupting the flow at all. Here's another classic example. A says, 짜잔, 나 폰 샀어. B says, 와, 진짜 예쁘다. 어디서 샀어? A says, 인터넷에서. If you translate this naturally, it means the exact same thing as writing out every word like A says, 짜잔, 나 폰 샀어. B says, 와, 폰 진짜 예쁘다. 어디서 샀어? A says, 인터넷에서 샀어. But because the topic is already established as the phone, putting the word phone at the front of every sentence with the topic marker 는 actually sounds incredibly awkward and disrupts the conversational flow. You don't keep repeating the topic of the conversation throughout the entire conversation. Omitting it is the grammatically correct choice here. Now, the next sentence structure is the double subject pattern. This is a type of sentence you probably use every single day without even realizing it, to the point where you go, wait, this was it? For example, when you say, 머리 아파요. Grammatically, this is seen as omitting 저 from the full thought, 저, 머리 아파요. Obviously, the person speaking is talking about their own head, not a random stranger's head. Because of this, a vast majority of Korean adjectives and intransitive verbs operate on this double subject pattern. Another example is when you walk into a place and say, 와, 여기 너무 좋다. Because Korean doesn't have definite markers, you arrange the bigger concept first. You could say, 여기 분위기 너무 좋다. Or 여기 인테리어 너무 좋다. But even if you just drop those details and say, 와, 여기 너무 좋다, people naturally understand what you mean based on what you are looking at. I truly hope today's talk didn't completely ruin the foundation of what you've already studied. But I think it takes courage to put these ideas out there. It gets people debating, agreeing, or disagreeing, and that is exactly how we learn and grow. I've spent a long time studying this deeply, which is why I share it with so much passion. I really hope it helps you on your Korean journey.